government, I'm going to listen to me. I'm going to make my voice heard in America. And who showed up, who got organized, and who made their voices heard. And here's the deal. There were a lot of skeptics when this happened who said, yeah, they made their voices heard, but will they still be here next week? And the answer was, Will they still be here next month? And the answer was, oh yeah. And will they still be here a year from now? And the answer is, there are more of us now than there was back then. Because people are getting organized, they are speaking out. And I want you to think about it from that point forward. So we had the women's rally, right? We had all the women marching in pink pussy hats. And keep in mind, this was organized from the ground up. It was not like a bunch of leaders that, oh, let's march. No, it was people who said, I want my voice to be heard. And when that happened, just a couple of months later, the scientists said, we want to stand up for science. And I was like, yeah, right? They stood up. Now, I think it was because they actually wanted to show how good their science would be. Right? My personal favorite was beer, brought to you by science. Right? But the notion, the scientists said, we want to make sure that there's someone standing up for facts, for reality. We're going to get out here and we're going to protest. We believe in science. And then we get into it over healthcare, and the healthcare debate continues to emerge. And who comes to Washington? The mothers of kids with complex medical needs. I saw these mamas. I saw these mamas bring these babies who have, some of them had to pull wagons that had breathing equipment in it, feeding equipment in it. And they got there, they'd never lobbied before. They got there and they got right in the faces of the Republican senators who were about to vote and said, this is the face of Medicaid. This is the child who depends on the rest of us so that she can have the therapist she needs, so that she can have access to the medication she needs, to the equipment she needs. This vote you are about to take is life or death for this child. And at the end of the day, that summer, we managed to save health care for 35 million Americans. More votes than we had before. We did it because people spoke out. And it's continued since then. It's continued through now 15-year-olds and 16-year-olds and 17-year-olds in the wake of yet another mass shooting have said, we are going to be in the march for change. We are going to make our government listen to us. And they are going to make sure that America makes the changes that make all of our kids safer. And I want to say one more. Since I'm in the house of the teachers, anybody notice who else is speaking up? The teachers in Oklahoma, the teachers So here's how I look at this moment. Here's how I look at it. There's a lot that's going on that's really scary. A lot of attacks on the very foundations of democracy. Attacks on voting. Attacks on an independent free press, attacks on an independent judiciary, attack. But at the very same moment, democracy is reinventing itself. We are reconnecting with each other, and we together are going to build a future. I am optimistic about this November. I am optimistic about every day going forward. Because I believe across this country, we are going to demand and we are going to get an America that doesn't just work for a thin slice at the top. A government that isn't just beholden to the richest and most powerful among us, but a government that truly works for all of us. And that's what makes me optimistic.
Step back here and talk about guns.
Let's talk about guns.
So as you mentioned, there was this march from young people across Washington, in Boston, across the country. And when I was going back and preparing for this, I did come across a clip from 2015 at a slightly boozier version of a political chat, the late great political happy hour with the Boston Globe. And the very first question was what your biggest political regret was, and you said that it wasn't that it was that you weren't able to pass gun reform. So I'm curious now, 3 years later, what concrete measures are you hoping to push for to address not just the scourge of mass shootings, but the daily drumbeat of violence that are so common in this country?
Jennifer, I'm glad you widened the question, because mass shootings capture national attention and a lot of press. But the truth is, gun violence happens every single day in America. And it's something we have to acknowledge. This is not just about stopping mass shootings, although it's powerfully important. This is about making our kids safe every single day. Right. 7 young people in America die, on average, every day, children and teenagers. And they die from gun violence. If 7 young people were dying every day in America from some mysterious virus, man, we would be all in. We would be putting the money in research. We would be changing the laws. We would be talking about how we
what's the version of that for gun control?
So part of it is we got to break the stranglehold that the NRA holds on the American Congress. Here's how I see this now. You keep thinking, well, if we just put something really sensible on the table, something that's supported by 70%, 80%, 90% of Americans, surely we can get that through. We've done that on background checks. Most Americans, including most gun owners, agree that we could do better on background checks. That weapons of war do not belong on American streets. We should stop. I tell you one that really pushed it in my face a couple of years ago. We have the idea to say, if you're on the terrorist watch list, if you can't fly because you're on the terrorist watch list, you shouldn't be able to buy a gun, right? But here's the deal, on every one of those, we can't even get a vote in a Republican-controlled Congress. So here's how I see this. When the kids get out in March, when they show up, when they talk about this issue, and when they say, understand, this is not a moment, this is a movement. We will be here tomorrow and the next day and the next day, and we're going to demand some accountability in November. When they say that, I think of it like a dam. The NRA has built a dam across democracy in America, and the river can't flow. And the pressure's building up, and the pressure's building up, and the pressure's building up. And what I say right now, to young people, to everyone else who cares about the safety of our kids, who cares about gun violence in our neighborhoods, in our schools, in our cities, in our towns, in rural areas, to everyone who cares about this, change is coming. I don't know if it's coming this week, or it's coming this month, or it's coming this year, but I guarantee this dam is going to break, and Congress is going to do the will of the people. We will.
The young people who might turn to senators that they see as allies, if they came to you and said, Senator Warren, what are you specifically doing? What are you pushing for? What would you tell them? I would tell them, because that's really the point here. We have a multitude of things that we could support here. I named 2 of them right there. We could do better background checks. We could do better in terms of taking weapons of war off the streets. And there are lots of variations within that. I actually want to add a third one. We need to treat gun violence like any other public health issue, and that means we actually need to conduct serious research on what kinds of changes we make. What matters is not whether we get this one first or this one first. What matters is that we break the stranglehold of the NRA, and we get sensible gun legislation through that is supported by the overwhelming majority of Americans. I think that has to be our key goal. And then pivoting to another scourge that's all too familiar to us here in the Northeast, the opioid epidemic. You and Congressman Cummings are going to be putting forward legislation on that. I believe you're going to be previewing it tomorrow.
That's right.
Inspired by legislation from the middle of the HIV/AIDS epidemic. Now, given the political gridlock in Washington right now, there is a desire for a bipartisan win. Do you think this could be it?
So let me do a little more history around this and a little spoiler alert about what Congressman Cummings and I will be talking about tomorrow. Here's how I see this problem. We've had a problem with addiction, with opioids for a long time in this country. The difference is that now the numbers are going up, the numbers are going up, and the numbers are going up. Recently, there was a study that was out that said that 1 in every 4 families in Massachusetts knows someone who died from the opioid epidemic. Think about that. I actually don't think there's a family that in the whole Commonwealth that isn't touched in one way or another by what's happened in terms of the availability of opioids and how opioids has just wrecked families as well as caused the death of so many young people. We lost about 2,000 people who died last year in Massachusetts, and so many more. Talk to their parents, talk to their brothers and sisters who are lost in the full meaning of the word, just gone to their families. So Congressman Cummings and I, Elijah and I, talked about this for a long time, and we said, it reminds us of the AIDS epidemic, how you watched people dying, the numbers were small, and then the numbers started to climb. And the federal government, that's where all the resources are, lots of resources to deal with this problem. The federal government kind of, a little bit around the edges, would support a little bit of research, but not enough to deal with a crisis that was on a growing and accelerating path until a boy named Ryan White died from HIV/AIDS. And when he did, Congress came together. He had a blood transfusion and ended up with AIDS. Congress came together, bipartisan, and said, it's time to act. This is an area that was full of stigma. Blame the victim. Don't treat it like a medical problem. And Congress said, no, we're going to put real resources behind dealing with this problem. And it made the difference. We put the money into research, we put the money into outreach, we put the money into education. And today, we have eradicated HIV/AIDS. But today, there's real treatment. The numbers have gone down. This is a condition that many people live with and many people manage. What we want to see is the same kind of approach on opioids. We want to put enough money in, not that it'll nibble around the edges, but make a transformative difference. And so what we're going to propose tomorrow is that the federal government put $100 billion over the next 10 years, that's $10 billion a year, into treating the opioid crisis in this country. And we want to make this money available to the states because we recognize what's happening in Massachusetts doesn't look exactly like what's happening in South Dakota, which does not look exactly like what's happening in Florida or West Virginia. We want the states, we want localities, we want treatment centers to be able to get the money directly. But we want enough money available that everyone has the opportunity to be treated, that we actually make the case for how to change the addiction crisis that continues to grow. So Congressman Cummings and I are going to put this out in the next few days. And look, I want to make now I really will get to your point about bipartisanship. The opioid crisis is not something that's just hitting Democrats. It's not just people who voted for our team who are worried about this crisis and who are being affected by it. It's all of America, and it has a profound economic impact on this country. We're losing young people. We're losing 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds, people who ought to be in their peak earning years, out there being part, and instead they're dying. They're lost. Their children are being raised by their grandparents. So we see this as something that Democrats and Republicans ought to be able to come together. I've already done 2 bills with Shelley Moore Capito, who's a Republican from West Virginia, to try to cut down on opioids in circulation, try to get it on the front end of this problem. There have been other pieces of bipartisan legislation. So we're working out the details, Congressman Cummings and I, so he's got it in the House, I've got it in the Senate. But you better believe I'm going to reach out, not just to Democrats, but to Republicans, to try to say, come, let us work together on this issue for the good of everyone. That's what I want to see us do on opioids. I think it's important.
And the last question that I've got for you before we open it up to everyone else, so make sure you've got those tickets handy. We're going to come to them. Is we are on Columbia Point right now.
Yeah.
We are on some prime waterfront area, and it looks
More
like
waterfront than anyone intended on some days.
and it looks like it's rising.
Yes.
So my question is, given the uncertainty on the federal level right now over participation in the Paris Climate Accords or other international climate agreements, whose responsibility is taking leadership on environmental issues? Who is that coming down to? The federal system, the states,
It's
the
all of
cities?
us. It's all of us. We all have to take leadership on the climate front. Our Earth requires it. This is no longer, we can't pass this off to someone else. But my job is, I sit in the United States Senate. So my job is to hammer on the federal government to do its part, to be a good partner. And I see that at multiple levels. The first one is, how about if we start out by saying the science is real, global change is happening, global climate change is happening. We need to pay attention to that. So that's where we start this, and that means all hands on deck at the federal level. Yes, we need to abide by the Paris Climate Accord. We need an Environmental Protection Agency director who both believes in science and believes that it is the job of the federal government to make us all safer. And part of that is around climate. We need to put the resources into making sure, I'm going to hit a second level, infrastructure is built that is more resilient. So we can't just keep our roads and bridges exactly where they are. A power structure that was built 100 years ago, a power distribution system, when nobody thought about the kind of rising sea levels that we're looking at now and the kinds of storms we're seeing now. We need real changes in our infrastructure, and that means real investment in infrastructure going forward. And I want to mention a third one, and that is down at the nitty-gritty level, flood insurance. We have to have a flood insurance program that works for families who already live in these areas. And part of what I've worked on, and I'm very proud now that we've gotten into law, is that a portion of the money in flood insurance can now be used to help people in anticipation of these big storms build for more resilience, to do things like raise their homes so that they will be more resistant to flooding, to change the kind of power they get so that they get power locally. All on the backs of changing the contracts for a handful of workers. It's not going to work. If we really want to have a 21st century infrastructure and transportation system in this region, then we've got to make an investment in it. Now, I believe in a good federal partner for that. I want to see federal money in infrastructure. I helped get money for the Green Line and the Green Line extension, and that's important, but it's not nearly enough. We are nibbling at the transportation infrastructure around the edges, and man, that's just not going to work anymore. We need significant change, not 1% and 2% changes. We need big change in this area. That's how we will build a future.
Yeah. Great.
Thanks so much for taking time out of your schedule to do this. My name is Megan Hamilton. I live in Taunton, and I work at a nonprofit in Brockton.
Good. Good for you, Megan. Good to have you here.
And my question's a little bit of a two-parter. With the new wave of the teacher strikes that are happening right now in Oklahoma, how do we take these grassroots movements and take them to a more national scale to make sure that these kind of changes happen in Massachusetts as well? And how do we as just regular citizens and maybe activists better partner with our representatives like yourself to make like substantial physical change happen?
Okay, so I'm going to take this question, Megan, as and I want to know if you think this is right. So I've done 22 town halls before this over the past year, and there's been exactly one question that I've gotten in every single town hall, and that is some variation on how do I get more engaged and make myself heard? How do I get more engaged and be more effective? And I take it that's really your question on this. Is that fair? That's fair. Okay, we'll do it. All right.
She must have a really good, concise answer at this
No, I don't. But it's the right question. Because here's the exciting part. You know, I was talking at the top about why I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic precisely for the question. I'm optimistic because there is so much hunger for an answer to this question. I am optimistic because so many people are saying, help me figure out what to do, because as soon as I figure out, I'm going to get out there and do it. And that's what really matters. So, part of it, oops, I do get excited by this. Let me start with some pieces. Okay, first piece is join a group. And I hope everybody has done that by now. If you've already joined one group, I hope you've joined two, right? And maybe three. And let me tell you why. There's actually a very specific reason. The groups help keep us informed, and they help alert us to what's coming up next. We need to fight the fights at the right time. We got so many fronts we need to fight on. But we got to fight the fights in order, right, to be most effective. And to get ourselves organized and out there. So that's part of it, is join a group. The second thing I want to say on this one is we can't just talk to each other. Those days we just can't. We have got to reach out and talk with people who don't agree with us. Woo! And we can't just treat them all as you're bad people because you don't agree with us. There are legitimate reasons to argue, to disagree, but at the end of the day, that means we've got to have those conversations. And yes, that means you really do have to talk with your cranky uncle. And Thanksgiving, 4th of July is coming up, Memorial Day. Those Memorial Day pickups, oh, you have one of those uncles, I can tell because you're laughing. You have to reach out and talk to people. You need to reach out to people you don't know as well. People that you don't know what their views are. You know, don't do it in a creepy way, but reach out. And I'm serious. And I actually have a suggestion along those lines. Think of a specific issue that matters to you personally. It could be student loan debt. It could be transportation. It could be, right, investment in education. Healthcare. It could be healthcare. It could be this tax bill that's just gone through. Pick one. And figure out how to talk about it in a pretty short way, and a way that's personal. Why it matters to you personally. And then get out there and talk about it. And when you talk about it with one person, talk about it with a second, talk about it with a third, talk about it with a fourth. We're only going to make change, person to person, eye to eye, heart to heart, across this Commonwealth and across this country. The third one is make a commitment. And for that one, it can be anything. You can tell or not tell. To make a phone call every day. To send an email every day. To talk to one new person every day. And I'll tell you why to make a commitment. You make a commitment partly because it really means you'll do the thing, and doing the thing helps make change. But you make a commitment because it changes you. You become a different person. You become a person who is a part of this democracy. A person who sees it's not just you show up on election day and that's what made the difference. No, democracy isn't going to work that way anymore. That's why we're here. I think everyone in this room understands that. The old forms of democracy, they don't work anymore. It's not enough to say, you know, we gave this to our elected officials, they'll go off, they'll talk about it, they'll come back. And I'll show up once every 2 years, maybe once every 4 years. It's that you have to say now in this democracy, I'm going to show up every single day. I'm going to show up for those kids. I'm going to show up for those 7 kids who were killed today. And the 7 who are going to be killed tomorrow. And the 7 who are going to be killed the day after that, until we make some change in this country. Those teachers in West Virginia, those teachers in Oklahoma, you know, they're like the rest of us. They're the people who said, I'm going to be an activist. And they're people who just said, enough is enough. And enough is enough. And they've reached the point where they realize you can't count on someone else to carry this. We got to carry this one in ourselves. So thank you, Megan. Stay in the fight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Senator and Jen. I have an 8th grader from the Lila Frederick Douglass School of Boston Public Schools.
All right. Come on up.
Go for it.
Hello, Senator Warren.
Hello.
My name is Mel.
Mel?
Yes. The question that I have for you is, I wonder what you think about how can we, Boston, like students from Boston, most schools, made most of immigrants. How can we be more united?
Oh, that's a nice question, Mel. And it starts with you. It starts with the fact that you show up at an event to talk about, there are a lot of things you know that you could be doing on a nice Thursday afternoon, and instead you're here to talk about the future of your country. Woo. And that's pretty impressive. So, Mel, I think one of the things that has been so inspiring about the kids coming off the sidelines in the gun debate is that they have spoken up and said, this is my future too. And you're going to hear from me about it. They've taken ownership over their part of citizenship. I think we're seeing more, and I think that's what the Oklahoma teachers have said, and the West Virginia teachers have said. I take ownership for my piece of how to make this country a country that works better. You know, every one of those teachers who's out there fighting is not just fighting for themselves. Yeah, do they deserve a salary increase? You bet they do. But they're fighting for their kids. They're fighting for an education system that works. They're fighting for an education system that has enough resources, that kids have an opportunity to be in a decent classroom to learn, and an opportunity for the next person to come in and say, teaching is a good career. I could do that. They're fighting for their vision of how to build an America that works. Every one of the young people who's come off the sidelines to be in the gun debate is doing the same. Yeah, they're fighting for their safety, but they're fighting for the safety of everyone else, and they're fighting for a democracy that works for everyone else. You raised the question of immigration, and I think about the promise that our government made to dreamers. Our government said to 800,000 young people, you come out of the shadows, you get vetted, and then you will have the chance to get an education, to get a job, to serve in the military, to be part of the American dream. And Donald Trump broke that promise. And then threw it in the lap of Congress. And Congress has not been able to pull itself together to repair it. This is another place where Americans, all of us, need to make our voices heard. You know, I think of it this way. I don't know what brings you to the fight. I don't know what brings you in today. It could be guns. It could be immigration. It could be education. We could pick a lot of different issues. Housing finance, the ones that come up here. A lot of people are motivated by a different issue. But at the end of the day, here's going to be the key. Either we're going to bring those issues together, and we're going to pick up each other's fights as our fights. That it's not going to be yours versus mine. That it's going to be that we have a vision of America Mel, thank you for being here. And the answer is, keep speaking up, gal. You got a lot to say.
We are right at the end of it right now. So I know. I would do more. We should all talk much more quickly. I'm working on it. So in the spirit of that, we're going to do a lightning round.
Okay. And when the lightning round's over, what are we going to do?
When the lightning's round, I'm told to tell you that there will be selfies. Not
If anybody wants to. We're going to stay to the selfies. Okay.
I'm going to be somewhere else. So
Jennifer's not a selfie person.
this should shock nobody. So at any rate, what's your biggest, if you had one legislative or career do-over, what would it be?
Well, you mean the things I wish we won that we haven't would be guns, it would be immigration, it would be to get a vote on my student loan bill, to reduce the debt burden for our young people. It would be able to get a vote on my bill on Social Security expansion. We need to support and expand Social Security. We don't even talk about this anymore. Healthcare, we need to bring down the cost. I'm sorry, I know this was lightning round.
I was going to say, you have a very different impression of lightning.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a slow electrocution.
No, I think of it more as multiple bolts. Why limit yourself to one bolt? But I really do think of it. No, I do think of it as this. All the places where Congress is breaking down. Can I actually want to say one thing on this economic stuff? I know, lightning round. But I do want to say a point about this. The kinds of things I'm arguing for on economic opportunity, about investing more in education, about reducing the student loan debt, about the fight for 15, raising the minimum wage, about giving unions more opportunities to organize people and create collective bargaining for them, about reworking Social Security so that there's more money available to those who depend most on it, that better regulation and frankly stronger regulation of Wall Street banks, that every piece of this is something that the overwhelming majority of Americans believe in. This is not like closely divided Democrat-Republican 49-51. The kinds of things I'm talking about are basically 2 out of every 3 Americans think, yeah, we ought to be investing more over here. And would believe that we should not give away $1.5 trillion to billionaires and giant multinational corporations and then starve our schools and watch the cost of health care and health insurance shoot through the roof. That we should invest more in research and education. Every one of those. And yet, in a democratically elected Congress, we can't even get votes on those. And that tells you that something is fundamentally wrong, something is fundamentally broken in our political system. That it is now a political system where money talks and too much of Congress doesn't hear anything else. The NRA calls the shots, the lobbyists call the shots, the Wall Street banks call the shots, and Congress dances. They call the tune, Congress dances. And that's the fundamental problem in America right now. All these people who come together and say, I want to make my voice heard, are basically saying, I want democracy to work again. And so when you ask me what I care most about, it's not the single issue. It's that we need a government, once again, that doesn't just work for the thinnest slice at the top. We need a government that works for the people. That's what this is about.